Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first webinar in our OT for IT webinar series. My name is Alexis Murphy, and I will be your host today. On today's webinar, we'll be talking about the role of a core data fabric in enabling easier access to the right insights for enterprise-wide optimization from the equipment to the ERP. Before we get into the fun stuff and today's presentation, I want to be sure to mention that today's event may include forward-looking statements. The information presented is intended to be an outline of general product direction, and it should not be relied on in making a purchasing decision. Now for some housekeeping. You should all see an interface with some buttons at the bottom of your screen. They look like the ones on the right side of the slide here. Please send any questions you have through the orange chat bubble button. Through the purple envelope button, you can contact our team. The blue paperclip button is our most important, as it's where you'll find relevant content and resources related to today's webinar. Through that orange person icon, you can connect with our presenter today. That would be Senior Product Management Leader Brian Johnson. If you need technical assistance, please reach out through that orange question mark button, though most issues can be resolved by just refreshing your browser. And then lastly, please share your feedback. We have that pink checklist button where you can send us your challenges, your different initiatives. We're using this information to build our products collaboratively with your insights, so we appreciate anything you can send along. And with that, I'd like to introduce our speaker, Brian Johnson. He is the product manager for Proficy Historian, Historian Cloud, and the future Proficy Data Hub at GE Vernova Proficy Software and Services. He is a certified agile product owner, and he has worked in product development and product management for a decade. He has a passion for driving digital transformation and new technology adoption with a focus on cloud technologies. Technology as a catalyst for growth and change is an area he finds particularly interesting. He has an undergraduate degree from Harvard University and certificates in digital transformation from Cornell University. So with that, let's bring Brian in. Take it away, Brian.
Awesome. Thank you, Alexis. Really excited to be here today to talk about what I don't think happens very often in our portfolio, the launch of or the explanation of a totally new product and category within the portfolio coming from the Proficy suite. I think most of us have seen me present Historian in the past. And so, yeah, I'm really excited to be here today to talk about what's going on with what we're calling our data hub. We've seen the need across many of our customers for a data solution, combining all of the data from your factory floor to your Proficy suite, or vice versa, taking the data from your Proficy suite and being able to move it into external applications or data lakes or other places where you may need it, right? So I think where we'll start today is there's a problem, right? Many of us are probably feeling the problem. We see it on a day-to-day basis. The more data we're collecting, the more we have to store, the more we have to manipulate, the more options it gives us in terms of being able to find insight. But really, how do we do that is the question, right? So starting with the problem, it's something that I'm hoping we're going to solve with the Data Hub. And I'm sure folks have heard a little bit about it now. We've been talking about it for a little while, but it's very exciting. And it really starts here, right? I think we've seen the proliferation of information over time, right? Whether it's sensors being more instrumented and being able to collect more data, or moving over into an enterprise level where you could have tens of millions or hundreds of millions of tags, right? The problem, as we see, is exponential. It gets worse the more data you collect. And then it's hard when you're setting up new factories, right? How do you make sure that you have that cross-reference? So data scaling as an issue, number one. Limited cross-reference, number two, right? If we have factory one and I'm the admin and factory two is built and there's a different admin, we may collect the same data, but there's nothing to say that we need to name it the same or that it needs to be configured in a way that makes sense across multiple footprints, right? Once you have a multi-site operation, it's very hard to make sure that you have that sort of data that works in concert and that folks are able to understand what it's telling them. And even worse than that, when you get to sort of cross shop floor operations, or you're looking at how do you drive efficiency in shop one versus shop two, even though they're collecting the same data, you may not realize that. So unnecessary maintenance costs is really where this leads us to say, how do we know, right? We're missing opportunity because we don't have any of that context. And that brings us to step 3, right? Adding context into the data is super important when you think of factory floor operations. What is it telling us? What do we need to know? How do we know what we're missing? And the answer today is we don't necessarily know. So the thrust here is twofold, right? Context the data, right? Making sure that everybody knows what the data is telling you, where it's coming from, and where you can go in the future to make sure that you're getting the best out of your operations. And then secondly, you see here, it takes an estimated 18 months for automotive plants to add new facilities. We're looking to bring that down to a matter of weeks with the configuration that we'll have available in the data hub to make sure that you can plug and play different models. You can bring it in. We're starting with an ISA 95 model, which we'll talk about in a future slide, but looking at others like SESME or other protocols that we can bring to the table to make sure that as a customer, you have all of the information you need to link your operations together to make sure you're getting the same information from all the different places that you're collecting data. And then at the end of the day, you're able to really drive analytics to get a positive outcome, right? You can see only 5% of manufacturers have at least one factory at full smart status. Let's help you to get there, right? With Data Hub, you're going to have the preeminent option on the market to make sure that you're able to get your data out of the silos that it lives in today and make sure that you're able to drive an insight and to drive a real impact into your process. And so that everybody across your operation will know what's going on and when it's happening and how to fix any issue that arises. We sort of covered this in the last slide, but data is the biggest challenge to transformation, right? In recent research, I've learned, data is no longer sort of a byproduct of manufacturing. It really is becoming the currency of the manufacturing floor and the manufacturing operation, right? Because we can learn what has happened or what is happening, we can move to predict what might happen or what could happen or what is happening in the future based on collected historical data, right? As long as that data is tagged and analyzed or structured in the proper way, and once you have those two other pieces of tag and analyze structure, you're able to then use the data. So you can see here, flowing onto the problem of configuration, right? Many folks have data that they don't know what to do with today. How do we solve that problem, right? 75% of surveyed manufacturing executives consider advanced analytics to be critical for success. I would venture it's probably higher than that if we were to really poll the room. It's super important to understand that you can only analyze, right? You cannot drive an advanced analytic unless you have these 3 categories over here, right? Tagged and analyzed. This is really where historian is key to the operation, right? Tag data, you know where it comes from. You can give it a tag name that gives it a place that you know where it is coming from. What is it telling you? Like what machine are you learning about? And then analyze, right? Once you have the data in there, you can tag and analyze it. The cool part with Data Hub is once the data is tagged, you can move it into a unified namespace where you'll have the same sort of structure across all of your plants, right? Then you have a much more powerful footprint. You're not looking at individual data points. You're looking at aggregated data points. You're looking at collections of data pulled out of their silos, tagged and analyzed across a much larger footprint to give you a much more holistic view of what's going on in your operation. Structure, right? Data model is important. We're starting with ISA 95 with the Data Hub, but like I said, we're moving into other areas like SESME. Eventually, on my roadmap, I have the availability of file-based configuration, right? If you have a data model today, you don't have to give it up. You won't have to redo work that you've done, right? Ingesting existing models is one of the key features of the Data Hub. So a lot of good work is going in to make sure that we take this chart here and we make it all one color, right? We don't want to have a multicolored ring. We'd like to take this 40 to 80% of unused data and drive it down as close to 0 as we can, right? Because if we can give you tagging and analysis and we can give you structure for new Data Hub, it necessarily brings this number down and says, all right, well, taking it from 40 to 80% to a much smaller number. And the closer we get this to 0, the more use you get out of your data, the more value you'll have in your historian, the more value you'll have across your value chain, right? Whether it's from analytics on down, right? Easy ways to get quick opinions or quick information from your data helps you do better decision-making, helps you do faster decision-making, right? Time to value is a key that we see in our operations and from our customers all the time. And could we transform your time to value with close to 0% unused data? I think so. I think a lot of folks would agree, right? Who knows what's sitting in here that we could uncover that would lead to operational breakthroughs or new product enhancements or just overall efficiency in your process, right? If you don't have to invest in new footprint because you uncover something in this 40 to 80%, when we're bringing it down to 0% unused data, I think it's a super cool option to say, We have the power to do that. And with Data Hub, we're going to be able to give you that option, and you'll be able to see exactly what's going on in your footprint, which is super exciting. So when you think about digital transformation, there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle that you can see here. Highlighted in the middle is really where the Data Hub will fall. But there are pieces on the left and the right where, data collection and consolidation. If you have a historian today, hopefully you have Proficy historian. Thank you if you do. If you don't, I'd love to have a conversation about how we move you in that direction, right? Using Proficy historian will be key to the puzzle. You won't necessarily have to use Proficy historian, but I would love it if you would, honestly. So I'd love to have that conversation. So once your data is collected and consolidated, this is really where the Data Hub will take over and be able to give you these middle portions, the middle pillars here: contextualization, analysis and analytics, and visualization and control. If we think back to the previous slide, this is where the different colors of the wheel came in, right? Now, contextualization, S88 or S95. We're starting with S95 because it's an industry standard equipment model. Now, we're not stopping there. It's just where we've gone for our MVP builds, right? And MVP 2 is being released at the end of this month of Data Hub. So I'd love to get some folks on board that if after this chat, you'd love to know more, or you'd love to start to work with me and I could give you a beta of the software. That would be really exciting for me and for you, I think. So please reach out to me after this if you have some interest in moving forward that way. But you can see here, batch, lot, serial, materials, grades, storage options, whether it's tanks or bins or otherwise, right? Put the context into where the data is coming from, and it lets you get down to a very finite level, right? Potentially starting here at a higher level, S95 model, right? We can get down to which serial number is specifically affected if there's a quality issue, for example. Then the question is, why was there a quality issue, right? If we're enabling the analytics by bringing the data from across your enterprise together and from outside of the Proficy suite, right? If we can bring in data from third-party options, from your data lakes, for example, or add the Proficy data to a data lake, I think you get extra super powerful analytics and analysis. Real-time quality monitoring. Will there ever be an issue? Potentially. But we can minimize it by using the proper process and the proper information and the proper analytics to understand what's going on there. Data across sources. This is the key piece, right? We have a few pieces in Data Hub that we'll talk about going forward. It's really 4 key pieces, but data across sources is really, really powerful. We have customers today in the Proficy suite that are looking to do that are looking to bring data from ERP systems and quality systems and other outside tools and get them into data lakes so that data scientists can really run the full gamut of algorithms and tests and checks and get the best by building the best, most informed metrics. And those metrics in terms of visualization and control, right? Deliver information to the right stakeholders for fast action. We just talked about time to value. Fast action is key. Time is money. The longer we wait, right? Is time potentially a competitive advantage in our space? I think so for some of us. Could we potentially go faster? I think the answer is always yes, right? How do we drive out some of the waste from a process? Right? Many of us are lean. How do we get there? How do we take all of this, right? The whole package. We have the context. We can build the best, most feature-rich analytics. And then we can visualize and control a process. And then once we've achieved all of this here, right? You've built your data model. You're driving your informed decision-making. You now have increased awareness, right? Maybe you're now aware of things that you had never even thought of before. Because you have full access to the data, it covers the full scope of your operation. And you're seeing it from different angles or different facets that perhaps weren't available before because you're now using something like your Data Hub and Data Fabric to move your data around. It's really, really very cool to then be able to ensure interoperability, right? Information broadcast. Throughout this whole process on the left-hand side, we're learning, right? But once we get here, this is when we're going to tell the world what we've learned and what we're going to do about it. You can say, hey, we uncovered inefficiency in a process, or we've driven a better value. We've cut costs by a certain percentage because of what we uncovered here, right? This is where we get the information, like it says here, to or from the plant floor and operations system and enterprise systems. Close the loop on analytics for improvement, right? At this point, everybody knows. It should be an imperative across your organization to say, listen, this is what we've learned from our efforts. Maybe we run a Kaizen, maybe you run a Hoshinkanri. But because you're able to get all of this information out from the Data Hub because of the structure of how it's applied and how you're able to apply it in your organization and across your tools, you're able to get here much faster, better decision-making, make sure that everybody knows what the decisions are, make sure that everybody knows what the data is telling you, and it helps everybody across the board to make better decisions and to drive better results for your organization. All right. So we've sort of talked about the problem, what's going on in the industry, what have we seen from our perspective serving myriad industries across the globe, different areas, different footprints, different size manufacturers. We have a lot of different feed that comes from our folks that are customers of Historian or other products today within the Proficy portfolio. And it leads us to answer this question: how do operations, data ops, and a manufacturing fabric help, right? We've highlighted that there's a problem. How are we specifically within Proficy going to solve it for you? Data fabric is the key one. I think recently this topic has really become very popular. You know, there are tools out there now like Cognite and HighByte. Pi obviously has had theirs. Aviva has very powerful tools in terms of event frames and their data options. We have the same now, right? And we deliver much more than any of the competitors in the market because of the way we integrate with the Proficy portfolio and are able to bring not only third-party data, but our primary data together to be able to let you drive better results, right? Visualization, you can see here, if we're thinking about data fabric, right? When you picture a fabric, it's really generally a woven garment made up of several threads. Those threads come together, and individually, each of those threads isn't super useful, right? If we had a shirt made of 3 threads, not as good as a shirt made of 1,000 threads that are woven together. But you can see here the different threads, right? As you have the threads coming from your ERP system, your time series, your quality, your SCADA systems, maintenance and management systems, shop floor, and then out to visualization, right? Everything comes together in the form of the data fabric and data ops. Data ops is getting the flow correct, right? We're coming in and we're going out. We're coming in and we're going out. Each of these can feed in, but also consume, which is really very interesting. And then from your shop floor, right? How much data comes off of a robot like this? Thousands of tags, right? Position monitoring, vibration monitoring, all the different things. Now, extrapolate that across an entire operation where you've got 10, 15, 20, 30 or more robots, other equipment, different manufacturing lines, different packaging operations, right? Data comes from every place in your organization and operation and can flow into the data fabric with using our data ops and is informed by all these other processes, right? So being able to bring it together. And then you can see the end result is we're hoping that we accelerate development and enable an OT/IT data integration. That's the key. Bridging the gap, right? Traditionally, separate areas are increasingly becoming not so independent, right? We're working together much more, the OT and IT space. And being able to bring the data across from OT to the IT space is very popular, very powerful. Data fabric allows us to do that and centralized data flow. Now, you may say, but my operation is globally based. You know, I have operations in Europe, in the US, in Asia, the MENAT region, across the globe. How does that affect me? Well, the answer is you can run a data fabric that's inclusive of all of your sites across the globe. And that gives an even better footprint than folks that, you know, may have 1 or 2. If you have more than 2, 3, 5, 10 factories, you'll get so much power from this piece here to be able to feed visualizations that can drive impact across the globe. I think you'll see immediate impact from starting to use tools like Data Fabric and the Data Hub, which is really very cool. So we now understand that the Data Hub, Data Fabric is really cool. I'm sure we've heard a lot about Data Fabric just out in the environment today as it's becoming a much more popular topic. But how are we specifically breaking it down? I've said Data Hub multiple times at the beginning of this presentation. You may be saying, okay, well, it sounds interesting, but what is it exactly, Ryan? How do you explain it? This is how. When you think about it, it's really 4 key pieces that we're bringing together under the Data Hub. So one will be a data model, right? We've talked about that. That'll be ISA 95 to start, but there will be more. You know, I've had a lot of discussion now with folks at SESME to bring in their model. If you have a model that you're using today, you'll be able to bring it in, right? Configuration by file. I want to make sure that if you have an option that you're already using, if you're using any of the models in our products, the Historian model, for example, you can bring it together. All of the products are building capability to interface with the data model and then to use the centralized data model with the Data Hub as the backbone for all of the data ops going forward in Proficy, starting at the end of the year. Unified namespace, right? Once you've gone through and you've built your data model, You have model A, potentially model B, potentially model C, right? You can apply those wherever you need to across your environment. So if you build a new factory, you no longer have to configure it from the ground up. You could pick any of the data models that you've built in your data hub and be able to bring that forward and say, okay, new factory will get model A. Okay, well, we're building another factory in Australia. Maybe Australia needs model C. You'll be able to select using our config hub application that folks know and love today. And how do you move that across? Now, if you have those multiple facilities, a unified namespace, you can see here, this is where we add the context, right? So far, we've laid the groundwork. We've said context is king. Here it is. Here's where the context comes into the data hub. So unified namespace, if you have a single factory, you're already operating in a unified namespace. So good for you. You're already there. You've saved a little bit of time. But for folks that have 2 or more operations, the unified namespace is going to make sure that everybody comes together. So, admin in factory A and admin in factory B will be speaking the same language. You won't end up with historian tags that are measuring the same data, but are named something different because different people created them on different days. That I think could be really frustrating, but we're solving that problem with unified namespace. And you can see here, bringing together data from many different sources into a single element and timestamp, right? You shouldn't have to know that your data came from a certain point. You should just know, I have a question about my operation, or I have a problem that I need to solve. Where's the data? Here it is. The directory service helps with both of these things, right? Once your data model is here, once your unified namespace is here, all of it flows through the directory service to make sure that it's all kept in sync. And like I described at the beginning of talking about this slide, your data's there. If you have data model A and data model B and data model C, the directory service will keep them all in sync so that you can apply them where you need to, and you won't have to waste time thinking like, oh, where does C go and what are the unique pieces there and where does it? No, drag and drop. Add a new site to your map, add a data model, click, 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 just that easy. And really, that ease of configuration is super important to me personally, because I've seen folks have to go through massive historian configurations or the different configuration to connect the different products together from the SCADA to the historian or from MES to historian. Let's not do that anymore. Let's use the data hub as the backbone, use all the component parts, data model, unified namespace, directory service, and the data bus, and be able to bring it all together and make the configuration fast, easy, and simple. I think that's super important, right? Enterprise scale, we won't get to enterprise scale unless it's very easy to manage and very easy to operate and, intuitive. So that's what we're working towards. And obviously this is going to be a later in the year release, and all the products are now working to bring this all together under one umbrella. But the promise is there. And really the feedback we've had so far from customers that have seen it is really very positive. And now the final component of it, the data bus, access across all the products, right? This is where it comes in, right? Data models are there. Products are leveraging the data models. The unified namespace is keeping everything together. The directory service is making sure that it's all organized and structured so that you can easily access it. And then the data bus, make sure that you're all there. I described just now being able to just ask a question of the data or have a specific problem that you need to solve. We can do that because of the data bus, right? You shouldn't have to say, ooh, I need to pull in different variables from plant apps. And, I need to go get these historian tags to add to the puzzle. And, okay, I have different SCADA fields that I need to bring in. No, it should be, what's the temperature on oven 2 at line 3 and factory 12? And you're able to get that data. The data model works all together, pulls all the pieces, and you get the answer that you need. It shouldn't be, let's spend hours and hours of configuration just to get a simple answer. No, make it fast, easy, quick. We'll get there. And so these are the 4 pieces of the data hub and what it gets you as far as how is it going to work? Like, these are the component pieces. This is what it will be when we start out. Obviously, we'll grow and change. And if folks have input or viewpoints or any sort of feedback, I would love to hear it, really. Please reach out to me and let me know, like, what do you think of the direction, what you would like to see going forward, that sort of thing. And I guess the key to remember is our goal is at the bottom of the slide there, dramatically simplifying application development and exposing data from across suite and model context. So that's what we're going for. And I think we're well on our way to achieving it. And the feedback we've gotten so far from the work we've done is that we're definitely on the mark as far as achieving it. And this will be different than anything else on the market in terms of how it interacts with the Proficy portfolio and other data that you have there, including products like Snowflake or third-party data options. We're really looking to drive those forward and make sure that if you own data, you're able to get it where you need it, when you need it, to do what you need with it. All right. So you say, okay, we understand the core components. You can see the pieces that we've just talked about here along the right-hand side. But where does it sit within the portfolio, right? We have all of our products. And what it's going to do from the Data Hub perspective is we'll now underpin all of the operations and applications within the portfolio. So you can see here, the bottom layer, right? Infrastructure, cloud, on-prem, edge, doesn't necessarily matter to us right now. Then the configuration. Do all your configuration for your data, enter the model service, making your namespace, contextualization, distributing data. Like all of it's going to be in here, underpinning the rest of the portfolio. So you can see here. And then on the top, like Historian is on top of, but also within Data Hub, centralized configuration management across the whole portfolio. But then SCADA will be on top of it. MES will be able to pull from the data. All of the data from Historian coming from MES and HMI SCADA will be able to come together in one cohesive package. On top of all of that, now that we've been empowered to have all of this as one sort of module, right? All the data is now together. It's much more usable than before. This gets us into a AI ML conversation, right? The better data you have to feed a model, the better answers you can get out of the model and the easier it is to train. But analytics, right? Once we get on top, we have CSense in the portfolio. CSense will benefit. Operations Hub is going to be the way that you're visualizing all of the things from the portfolio. Now, not necessarily the only option. There, as long as there's interface to others, like Historian works today with things like TrendMiner or Seek or other tools that can accept API, it will be the same with Data Hub, right? I want you to get your data out where you need it, when you need it. If there's tools you're using today, use the same tools. I mean, obviously, we would love to have a conversation with you about using Operations Hub and CSense. They're super duper powerful. And the insights that you would get from having all of the connectivity across the portfolio and adding in those pieces to the puzzle, I think would be game changing for some of us that are watching this today. But we can have that conversation as we go forward. And then third-party complementary solutions. This is going to be a key piece here, right? The key that it's not just tying everything Proficy together, but it's bringing in other systems that are important to you, saying, you know, quality, like we talked before, other management systems, things that are there, plug and play, right? If it's there and it's important to you, like we talked about customers that are bringing in their ERP data and their timekeeping, so their Chronos system, like time data, other stuff, Historian, let's bring it all together. And this is how things will look going forward in the future, right? Once again, enterprise scale, right? There won't be a customer here that will feel constraint because of the way the product is architected, because of the way everything is tied together, because of the way we're leveraging technology to make this happen. There won't be sort of a bottleneck of data. If you're feeling that today, let's have a chat about Proficy Data Hub, right? If there's a bottleneck, if anyone here is having that sort of issue, is feeling pressure because of data in their environment, or you know, if you're staying up at night talking about security or thinking about data access, I'd love to have a conversation because I'd love to solve that problem for you with Data Hub. All right, so let's dig in a little more and think about how does each of these layers play together, right? We'll give sort of the overview, and then we'll dig into the specifics. And so now we're at the specific part, right? The integration, management, contextualization, distribution of data, data fabric. There we go. Now, we're also working on containerization and zero trust security, right? Only the folks that need access to the data will be able to get access to the data. That's true today. It will be true tomorrow. And in fact, going forward, it will be even better than it is today because there's continuous advancement. And our red team and cybersecurity folks are continuously looking at all of the products and making sure that if an exploit is found or if there's a security issue, it's immediately taken care of by the development teams. And they maintain all of the standards current in common cybersecurity today that we could have as far as ISO to make sure that we're meeting every benchmark and every regulatory requirement. And anyone can use our product without having to worry about cybersecurity or input of data or folks getting in where they shouldn't be. Not a problem there. And then UI UX, right? I think we've seen over the past few years, I just entered my third year with Historian. And since I came on board, I've seen the UI change dramatically based on input and feedback from our customers. I think you've seen that across the portfolio, right? UI and UX is a key to our success here. And this will be a differentiator in our product here of how you interact with it. How easy is it to use? Does it give you what you need? Is it intuitive? And we have a lot of research going on, actually, as we speak, for the Data Hub to make sure that the UI and UX, the experience that you have as a customer using the tool is second to none, right? I want to be first in class as far as UI and UX, and we're working on it. And then the pieces here, the key pieces of the data integration layer, the model, the namespace, and the message bus. And then Historian feeds all the data, collects all the data, make sure that you're able to move forward right there. historization, which then can leverage all of these pieces to get us to real-time data, and then future data, which is also very cool. Moving up, right? We've seen all this before. The operations and execution layer, SCADA and MES. Because of the data is collected and stored here, and the UX and the security and all of that, and the data fabric, we're able to bring all of this together, right? Centralized configuration, management, and deployment across all of these things here. You can see key component parts like task management or product data or batch, for example. All of it will be fed through. You'll be able to look at it all through Operations Hub, and it will all be underpinned by Historian. So the data will go in. Historian has a real known quantity to this crowd, hopefully. Makes us comfortable that the data storage is second to none and very efficient, very fast, and really effective to give us the full power of leveraging all of these applications using the Data Hub. And so you might say, okay, Brian, that's all really well and good. How do we understand exactly what you're telling us, right? What is part of the data model? How do we know? Like definition of data points, configuration and management of the data points. So the basic breakdown of what we're seeing today, and that's coming from options like we see here on the left-hand side, whether it's Historian or control systems or SCADA or analytics or GIS even. I have a lot of experience working in sort of Esri products. So I want to bring in GIS data and then anything else, like any other management system. You can see the general breakdown, right? You'll have your pump, so you'll have your asset, and underneath it, you'll be able to add a number of attributes that are right now working with ISA 95. In the future, like I've said, many different options, including custom options, right? If potentially you don't like any of the options that we have and you have one that's established in your footprint today, use that. Absolutely. I'm not going to tell you as PM of Data Hub that you need to do something new or different just to suit constraint. Like the point of this whole thing is to remove constraint. So I'm not going to add it in that respect. So you can see you'll have your asset, right? You can bring in your GIS location data, right? Where is that on the floor? We've had a customer that I spoke to recently that is using GIS data in underground piping configuration, right? They have a geolocation on a map and they can say, where's valve 12? And their system will say, okay, it's here. Here's your X and Y coordinates, go there. And they're able to tell right under the ground, under their shop floor, where is that valve? Where's the pipes? Where's the configuration? It's really very cool. So bringing in this sort of data hub, obviously your asset ID, what then falls under your asset ID? What do you care about in terms of timestamp data, vibrations, values? When does it go into alarm? Like a temperature, for example, of the pump, a value there. And then when does it go into an alarm condition? A lot of this will be super cool. And we're also working on an alarm viewer, a unified alarm viewer, using Data Hub as the underlying technology to be able to give you context to alarms. Where do they come from? What's happening? How do you make them go away? And then in the future, when will it occur again? How do you make it stop happening? It'll be really cool. And then something for analytics as well. So you're able to really get granular detail on this asset using the hierarchy of the model. So from your site, you'll have a pump. I mean, there are a few other places and classes in here that you could add additional to make sure that you're covering all the bases with that asset. But this is the basic structure, and it will feed data from these systems as a selection of what we have today, and adding more in the future. The key pieces with the model, right? Import one, associated current one. You could build a model, whether it's top down, bottom up, import and associate, or if you've got one, let's use it, right? The key here is I want to give you as many options as possible to be able to have the model you need when you need it and where you need it. That's really important to me. All right. So you've defined your model. You understand what's going on there. Now let's talk about data fabric. So the piece of data fabric that's really interesting is that it allows the data to move around. It brings all your sources of data together into a fabric, a weave, to make sure that you have the data where you need it, when you need it, to drive the results that you're looking for. So you can see here, we've got data fabric source on the right-hand side and data fabric consumption on the left-hand side. And the key is that it drives across the middle, right? You've got your data flowing in, and that's coming from REST or SQL or MQTT or Kafka coming in Historian this year, GraphQL coming with MES, right? Any of the protocols that we're using to move data around, the data fabric will be able to utilize them. And you can see using different protocols to bring in data from the systems that we've talked about, Historian, SCADA, control systems. But we'll be able to do it much faster and much more efficiently using something like Kafka or MQTT or REST than any other protocol. And this will make it very efficient to do your configuration and to set up your data fabric once your models are there. Now, the model that we just saw, right? How is that working? Consuming information from the Proficy products. And we highlight Kafka here, but it doesn't necessarily have to just be Kafka. So nothing to worry about there. Kafka is just the newest tool with Historian, so I wanted to call it out there. And then analytics and visualization, right? They are consuming all of the data that's coming from these different source systems and bringing it together to give you a very powerful analytic, a very concise, very easy to read visualization. And the more data that we can bring to bear here, the better we can do with analytics and visualization from the data fabric, from any of the tools that we're talking about here, right? At this point, you have a single pane of glass across your entire organization. Your operation is sort of very flat, very easy to understand. Any problem can be highlighted very easily and covered and dealt with. Or if you're in a mode to train an AI model, you can bring the data from all these different sources and make sure that you're able to then drive AI or machine learning into your analytics operation and operations. It's really a pretty cool option to have available. And because of the way we're planning to integrate with all the different tools, there's no bottleneck from your regard as a customer of the product to saying, well, we don't have a source available, or, oh, we'd love to get data from that system, but it's way too hard to integrate. No problem. We'll handle that. So we've talked through the Data Hub quite a bit now, and I think it's important to really start to wind this up by talking about what is the value you get. You may be saying, wow, this is really cool. We've heard about it, but now we're getting more detail. We really like what we're doing. What do we get at the end of the day, right? Single configuration, like we talked about. Model A, Model B, Model C. Apply it where you need to. Never have to create them individually again. You can create a bank of models or a single model across your organization and apply it where it needs to go, right? Can be shared across multiple applications to reduce development time. That's the key here. Faster time to value. Existing models and data connections, right? You can create one, or you can bring one in. If you've got one, I want you to use it. Single source information, data, alarms, IT and OT. Reduces traffic, right? You now have a single source to combine all of your information together. You no longer have two separate subsystems that you have to somehow integrate. Import and maintain, right? Either you've created the model, you're leveraging an existing model, then you're able to import and maintain it. So you no longer have to have a secondary system to do your model maintenance or to do your model creation, right? You can do it right within the Data Hub. And that's another time saver, right? You don't have to jump between systems. You don't have to have multiple experts. You've now got a single company to talk to when there's a problem. More innovation can happen that way, right? A single team to work with when you want innovation. We can help you with that. And then once you have all that, right, you've got your holistic view of IT and OT. So central lining, benchmarking, anything there. You've now reduced your system complexity from 2 to 1. That's a pretty good benefit. Common references for an asset, regardless of the application, right? Maybe we have something that's already in MES. We want it to be represented in Historian. We want it to be represented in the SCADA. We can now have a single reference where you can say machine 1A, and the machine 1A in MES is also in SCADA, is also in Historian. So you can drive full asset history, any of the data that you need across there, because it's all put together and it's the same everywhere. You no longer have any of that sort of washiness or lack of consistency or anything like that. And it really helps to drive visualization and to get a better picture of your environment. And it also makes your configuration much flatter. So you think back compared to configuration, configure once and be done. No, you don't have to configure multiple times where there's potential for mistake and human error and just waste of time, right? IT resources are expensive. Let's get them working on core competencies and not configuration or maintenance. And then enterprise model, right? We've said it a bunch of times now, reducing configuration and deployment time. And then aligning advanced capabilities. At the end of the day, you're doing all of this because you want access to an advanced capability, whether it's a new analytic or something else. It's really pretty cool to think that, you're on the cusp of having the most advanced analytics you've ever had for your organization because you're going to use Data Hub, or because you're able to bring in data because of Data Hub that you've never had access to before because it was too difficult, or you were lacking expertise, or you just didn't have the time in your environment to be able to spend to build these things. We can help you with that with Data Hub, being able to move it forward, right? Enabling deployment at scale. Let's focus on our core competencies as a manufacturer and not have to worry about maintaining systems or other things like that, right? Your administrative burden goes down from the moment you start to use Data Hub. All right. One of the key ways that we're going to interact with Data Hub is Kafka. So a new addition this year to the portfolio from a historian perspective, right? You can see here, producer and consumer. The key pieces are we're using the Avro schema, and we have a consumer and producer. When you think of consumer and producer in traditional historian parlance, it's really a distributor and a collector. So we'll be able to bring data in, send data out. It's a pub sub model. So if you're streaming data from a source, you can only subscribe to the topics that you really want to pay attention to. You don't have to sort through and take an entire data flow and parse. It's all there for you. You've already subscribed. And then the mapping is all there, and it's all done through Configuration Hub. So tag name, timestamp, value, quality. You'll see a theme here. Many things these days are done through Configuration Hub, and that doesn't change for Data Hub. So it makes it very easy to have a single pane of glass to work through to configure your entire Proficy system, including new products and additions, which is really very important. And then MQTT, sort of an oldie but a goodie here. Another really popular way to interact with a data fabric. So our MQTT capability is fully Sparkplug-B compliant, right? Why would you want MQTT perhaps instead of Kafka? Both of them are lightweight, low bandwidth, low overhead. MQTT, open messaging protocol, really very cool. You can get the same publish and subscribe communications using broker. So both Kafka and MQTT leverage sort of the three-step process of the consumer, broker, and producer. So they're very similar that way. And then security is paramount here, right? And then ideal for low-power devices. So Kafka may be a little bit faster protocol. MQTT has its benefits as well with security and low-power device compatibility. And then both of them really work well with cloud. So like I talked about Snowflake earlier. Snowflake has a native Kafka interface that we're going to use to send data there. So if you're a Snowflake customer already, I'd love to talk to you about how you're using it, what your expectation is, and if you would be interested in using Kafka from Data Hub into Snowflake. That would be a cool thing there. And then MQTT also has sort of that remote monitoring aspect to it as well, which is important. All right. So thank you today. And now we'll get into some questions.